Welcome to another Coffee with Samso. We're here at the University Club here in Crawley on the campus of University of Western Australia. I've got Venture Minerals Limited here with us today. They have been missing in action for a while. Look, the code is VMS. Andrew Radonjic is the managing director. Currently, their market cap is around 33 mil and share price about 1.9 cents Aussie. So, welcome, Andrew. It's been a while since you showed up on the platform.
Yes, that's right. But nevertheless, we've been busy.
Yes, and I think you pulled another rabbit out of the hat. Your recent release on boron, look, I think most people probably wouldn't know that existed to some degree. Can you share with us what's it about and how that affects venture?
Well, look, the boron is something that we recognise, early on in our drilling that we had some of our tin was sitting in this borate. Borates is a boron mineral, with tin and iron as well. And we certainly recognised it when we were drilling the holes very early on, and we knew it was there, along with our scheelite, our magnetite, our chalcopyrite, and also with our cassiterite, which has been the main focus for the company, because that's we're building a flow sheet around the cassiterite tin, if you like, because it's heavy, like tungsten, and we developed a flow sheet back in 2012, and we've been trying to, and we're in the process of building a flow sheet more, if you like, streamlined as part of our underground study. But quickly we realised that, and we'd sort of picked up on this a little while before, and we engaged CSIRO to sort of assist us in a co-funding arrangement about looking at, can we get the value of tin out of the borate, the boron tin iron mineral. And the conclusions we came to was that yes, we can. We have the Russians and the Chinese have been doing this for some time. They've got mines that produce boric acid, like our friends at Rio have been doing it in California since 1927, like our friends in Turkey as well, who produce over something like 55% of the world's borate, boron. And, that's sort of, we went, oh, okay, well, look, boron's a critical mineral. It's on the EU list, it's on Japan's list. So we thought the time to examine our non-cassiterite tin and the opportunities that presents to bring that into consideration as part of our mine optimization. And we realised it was probably too important to leave out.
Boron, I have to admit that it's kind of, I didn't even know that was a play or a metal. And I guess a lot of people in the industry, but I'm not surprised in some ways what you guys have, because of the geology that Mount Lindsay has, right? And when you've been a geologist long enough, you're never surprised. You just acknowledge that, hey, it's a bit like the lithium story, right? At one point in time, drilling through pegmatites is such a bad idea, but suddenly it's great. But you spoke about how you guys sort of engaged CSIRO to help you try and figure this out. At some point, you did a 2012 feasibility study, and you went down that road. And at which point did you guys suddenly go, should we be looking at this more, or things like that?
Look, we really didn't look at it in 2012 at all. Look, you drill the holes. We drilled, 100,000 metres of core. And the skarn deposit it opens so many opportunities in terms of different commodities. And this is, the skarn style mineralisation in Russia, China, in Vietnam with our new FAO project. Look at that project, for example. It's got the copper it extracts. It's one of the world's biggest tungsten mines. It's got gold, it's got copper, it's got fluorspar, it's got bismuth, byproducts it produces. And that's churning away, and that's a great project, world class. So, and that's just on the tungsten side of things. So these skarn deposits have got all these mineral opportunities that come out of them. And the great thing about Mount Lindsay, and even if you think about it in Tasmania, is not only is the minerals that are available just in that zone, the Mount Lindsay zone, but in all those parallel zones. And then, even if you talk about Mount Lindsay is, stratigraphy goes this way, and Mount Lindsay goes across many different, and that's why, we've been drilling, getting rare earths from this host rock and getting a nickel PGE target
You
on
got
this
the
rock.
ultramafic belt.
Ultramafic belt. So Mount Lindsay has never been a straightforward story, and it's kind of like, well, hang on, instead of trying to put a square peg in a round hole, so to speak, why don't we honour the geology, the mineralisation style, and see if we can get the boron out. And the boron, again, things like obviously climate change has got our attention to critical minerals. And boron is very clearly a critical mineral. And you think about boron, and most people go, "Oh, hang on, it's Rio, Etiadman, the Turkish state-owned company, control the market. 85% of the world's production comes from 55% from the Turkish mines, and the boron mine in California does the other, roughly 25%. But Rio trying to build the Yada project in Serbia, which is obviously on hold with the political issues there. And everyone thinks about lithium. It's a lithium boron mine. That's what this Yadarite is. And so clearly Rio, this mine's running out in California. It's been going for nearly 100 years. It's on the way, it's tailing out, and then they want a replacement. They want to maintain their control in the market. But when you think about the geopolitical risk of Turkey, which is kind of like a nation that sort of sits on the boundary between, if you like, Europe and the Islamic states in the Middle East. So geographically it sits on the boundary, if you like. It's kind of in, out of NATO or Europe. It's always been, it's a risk. So geopolitical risk has been highlighted. Critical minerals is boron, like I said, with the EU and on the Japan's list. And it's such a concentrated supply is always going to be a big risk. So that's one of our reasons why. But the other thing is that, we have all this this tin borate sitting outside of our cassiterite zone. We're focusing on, a relatively small percentage of the total resource. But the scheelite, the magnetite, the chalcopyrite, they all exist even with the tin borate. So if you can extract and crack the code on getting the boron out and get a tin and iron concentrate, which is what they do in China and Russia, then all of a sudden you've got the whole project. You're looking at the whole thing now. And that's Mount Lindsay, that main skarn, number 2 skarn. But then there's all these other skarns. You look at the assays we put in our announcement. Oh, greater than 1%. We went across over the detection limit because we didn't assay for it. So we could have 4 or 5, 10% boron in there. And these are the grades like, our friends at Iron Air have. At, five advanced materials, it's elements. They've got market caps of $500 million and we've got grades that are very similar to them. We just don't know the scale because we never really focused on it. And we've got, we know we've got two skarns well drilled out, not fully drilled out, reasonably well drilled out. Now, main number 2, there's number 1. Funnily enough, it's now before numbers. Main number 2, number 1. Waterhouse, which we discovered. Reward, which is an old tin mine anyway. Livingston, which we know about those two, but we're expanding upon those. But there's a whole bunch of skarns all the way along the stratigraphy, which we haven't even focused. And each one of those, might have 50,000 tonnes of tin metal in them. I'm not sure how much boron. We haven't done those numbers yet. And it's something we need to get a handle on. But if you've got 50, 50, 50, 50, all of a sudden you're not talking about a project with 80,000 tonnes of tin metal. You're talking about a project that's got close to half maybe 500,000 tonnes or 500,000 tonnes. This begins to be the scale of Renison just down the road. A different beast, but the same sort of quantum tin metal. And all of a sudden becomes a world-class tin province, because all of a sudden now we're honouring the style of mineralisation, and now we've got a processing technique that can unlock that. Then all of a sudden it's a much bigger play than what we were contemplating to do in the underground study, which was small, high grade, lower capex scenario. All of a sudden you might be looking at a much bigger mine underground, employing lower cost techniques, a bigger plant, completely different type of deposit, a much bigger tin tungsten. And all of a sudden, all the tungsten and the magnetite, which hasn't got this recoverable tin in it, becomes into play as well. So it's a real game changer for Mount Lindsay in our view. And certainly we will expand upon that story with further announcements about Mount Lindsay as we continue this work and try and establish, I suppose, the scale of this opportunity.
I mean, we sort of touched on, potentially there's some rare earths or nickel or on your ultra. I mean, that ultramafic belt is, I've noticed when I was looking through your thing and obviously doing some research for this interview, you guys haven't done much work on that. And so when you look back and then say, oh, look, we can actually add credits to your potential resource, and we've sort of talked about this for a long time, right? That there's this potential for credits to thing. So with the boron that you have now, is there any met issues? I mean, great, you got boron. Everyone talks about how great we have this, but do you know if there's any potential met issues?
Well, look, in the flow sheet, all this because the borates are a lower density and they're acid soluble. Our flow sheet doesn't, so it goes straight into a tailing stream. So the good thing about it is it would have been mined and processed. So the techniques that are employed in Russia and China will involve, because it's acid soluble, and like Ioneer has, these sort of processing techniques are just exactly what they do. They produce, and then you'll produce a tin concentrate and an iron concentrate out of it. So yes, those techniques haven't been employed in Australia or outside of Russia and China sphere, but would help us see so we can see clear pathways towards getting this work done about doing this. These techniques aren't, just because it's done in Russia and China doesn't mean we can't do it in Australia
Yeah.
or in the Western world.
Yeah.
So and what's really interesting is that the whole world's, this climate change thematic and critical minerals, whole world's, there's lots of groups out there who are trying to produce things cheaper, cleaner than ever before. And I'm not going to say they're all going to stick, but there might be. Here we have technology done that works today in Russia and China, but it's probably new technology that may come out of left field, which we'll look at those options as well. There might be something that even can treat it better, but we think there's before we weren't sure, but now that CSIRO have done the work, we're a lot more confident, and now that we know the scale of the opportunity, we think they're naturally separated in terms of metallurgy for all those reasons I just spoke about. And so therefore it's ideal really to have a tailing stream that has some significant value. And the great thing about it is when that goes through, it's still got the scheelite, still got the tungsten, the magnetite, and the copper going with it. So that's going to go through and get recovered as normal anyway, along with the cassiterite tin. So it's just a small addition to the plant. So it's very, very economical indeed. So, we're quietly confident.
Do you know of a percentage? And we spoke about it. I'm not sure if we stated the figure about like what you were going to recover in terms of your total potential tin resource. Now that you've got this tin borate that you can recover from, are we talking about like you only were able to recover 40% of the cassiterite, I mean,
Yeah,
from cassiterite, or
maybe. Well, look, cassiterite maybe only is a quarter to a third of the component, and of course it's not just like a line. There's cassiterite here, and then the borates are here, tin borates here. It's there's usually a bit mixed in here, and there's a bit mixed. It's never that straightforward, but it'll be a gradual phasing out of that typical scar and zonation, and that's why if you restrict yourself, it becomes a lot more difficult. And as when you go underground, the costs go up, so your cut-off grade will go up. Your plant's smaller, so costs would go up. Though we think we could probably we could probably get the costs down based upon the new work we're doing. But and of course there's inflation, which we're all battling. But with those increased costs, I think you start looking at these other opportunities, and can I have more revenue? And it's it was something we've been working in parallel at the time, and then as we were doing the work on the study, we soon started to realise that it's too important to leave out. You've got a fair chunk of this tin in the system. Like we've got 45 million tonnes in our resource, and we were looking at potentially a mine which is 20% of that sort of size.
20% of
Total resource.
total resource.
And that's why we went open pit the first time. Open pit we had 14 million tonnes of reserves, but remember you had 45 million tonnes of resource. So as you go underground, you've got higher costs, and then it becomes harder to. So it's going to shrink even more naturally. Yeah. But we were happy to do that because a lower cost. I mean, do a smaller capex operation. We're looking for something much larger. We're still very committed to being underground.
Yeah.
But instead of having these smaller stopes, much larger stopes, taking the whole system, having all the economies of scale going underground, have an impact on costs. And if you're able to be looking at all your resources, or a much higher percentage of your resources, I'm not saying all 45 million tonnes will convert, but we've got a good chance we could be getting I don't know, maybe 70 or 80% conversion.
Okay. So we're talking about tin, right? The tin, or we're talking about the boron.
Oh, I'm probably talking about the tin, the tungsten, magnetite.
All inclusive.
No, and we really haven't modelled what impact boron has yet. But we've got to do the work to get bed down the recoveries, get that part of the flow sheet added in. The rest of this flow sheet's pretty well settled. The new one, still got a little bit of work to do on that. But if this adjunct, we produce a flow sheet, got to get the capital costs and the operating costs. Of course, being tailings, the operating costs can be reasonably modest. And because if you're going to build this mine, you want to build it and get it right the first time, not just add a boron circuit later.
That will help.
That would help. Yeah. So look, I think the scale of this opportunity, bit of a revelation with the network, and certainly, the world has stood up and took notice of the boron industry, and not everyone knows about it, but when Ioneer got written out a check for $700 million to go and build that project, but it's being held up once subject to environmental permit. But of course, the permitting there's an issue there at the moment they have to deal with, and the mine, and the boron mine in California for Rio continues to run out of reserves. So the race is on, if you like.
I guess in some ways, the validity of the boron case is not in question. It's how you get to the end stage, if you are able to. But Googling what boron is, which I did, in terms of uses, and coming back to that point, just solar panels, or is there more to it?
Oh, the glass is about half the use, and the borosilicate glass, and that'll be in your solar panels. It strengthens, gives it the thermal properties it needs. So that's the big one. China consumes a lot of boron, probably the most, I think the most in the world. Asia's a big consumer, and that's to do with the boron carbide, which is used in building cars. It's the second strongest to diamond. So it's right up there with probably tungsten carbide. It is sort of, so boron carbide. There's the other use, which is is the it's in the permanent magnets, the neodymium, boron, iron magnets. So boron's about the same as neodymium in the magnets, about 1% or so. So again, it's one of those, I suppose you can talk about a little bit of tin and everything, a little spice metal. Well, boron's been called the fifth element of decarbonisation in a research report done by Credit Suisse probably about 18 months ago. And that's because it's endemic in so many things: ceramics, thermal insulation properties. It's in fertilizers. Its use is very broad, and I think that's kind of why it kind of slips under the radar a little bit. But clearly, those two ASX companies that are into boron at the moment have a market cap which is 10 or 15 times that of venture. Yes, they're in different styles of mineralisation, but when you look at the styles of mineralisation, down a little bit further down the list is where the skarn style mineralisation, your Russia, your China, they are a significant producer. Obviously, the geopolitical issue there, in terms of not going to buy it off them, but maybe you can buy it off an Australian company as a byproduct, and that's that's what we like about it. I think it fits that critical mineral space. It might not be on Australia's list, but it's definitely on the list, and if it's on the EU list, who knows whether Turkey's in with the EU or not, but certainly they've recognised that's an absolute risk because they control supply.
It's fairly new for most people, I would guess. I mean, most people wouldn't even know that that is a major component of sort of our new world, no emission world. As we're all learning, everything is different. I mean, so what's the update on, I call it the suite that you have, because obviously I do believe you're a more polymetallic player in Mount Lindsay, because obviously you have already that case, the tin, tungsten, iron, boron that you may have. In a very short summary, where's the market? And do you see it shifting one positively for you guys?
In terms of the broader market,
Yeah. Broader market, the tungsten pricing,
yeah,
where that moving, tin. I know tin's got that roller coaster ride. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, funnily enough, boron's quite steady.
okay.
Which is, and I don't know, it's because it's a duopoly that controls the price, but it's steadily increasing, which is great, but it's reasonably steady. But yeah, look, I think the world's in a state of flux, interest rates, but I think we're just starting to, I suppose, accept the new world as, if you like. I think hey, I won't tell you how old I am, but I was paying 19% interest rate when I bought my first house.
Yeah, so was I.
Yeah. So six, not so bad.
Yeah.
But it depends how, obviously current generation is more used to 1%, but or paying mortgages at a 3 or 4%. But yeah, look, I think prices are good, but they've been better. But they're much better than they were from the dark days of 2016, 15. So it has improved. The tin price, is tends to always have a two in front of it at least or more, and it will come back. But there's a huge shortage of materials, and certainly I think it's more up than that, than down. I think we're kind of at a floor, if you like. But and let's want to talk about tungsten for a second, well, there's a fair bit of tungsten getting used up in the Ukraine war at the moment. So it's
Yeah.
and those and NATO nations, which includes Turkey, by the way, at the moment, it needs to have a 30-day supply of munitions. So so when you're letting off some rockets that got 40 kilograms of tungsten each time, then you chew through it quite quickly. So strategic tungsten's very important. It's on everyone's list. Tungsten is. So that alone's enough, to gain, I think, government support to build Mount Lindsay.
I think tungsten, I think you brought up a very good point, because what's happening in Ukraine is more sophisticated kind of war, whereas in the previous ones that we use, it's more one-sided with technology, whereas both sides now, everyone's throwing all the technology in there. And I'm curious to see whether the tungsten price reacts to that or not, because like you said, it's being used, right? Whereas before, it's sort of didn't get used that much.
Well, look, I think Robert Freeland stood up and I think that was in PDAC recently, and talked about the amount of copper being used, or in these rounds, these shells and all that. And he also said that, about the world wanting to, we focus on MPVs and all this to try and get these projects banked and built. And yet China goes ahead and builds these, and that they just want the product, and I think, there's potentially some flaws in our system there, and the reason is that if you think about iron, not the iron price, but the tungsten, the tin price, these markets are small and much easier open to manipulation. So, what price would you put on in your study for tin? Well, gone from 50,000 to 17,000 in 6 months. I hate to see what a bank thinks about the volatility of that. That would be, a hard pill to swallow.
That's
So,
nuts. Yeah.
so building these sort of critical mineral projects, and rare earths included in that, is very hard to pin down a price, and that's why I think government support is pretty important for building back in those projects, because at some stage there's going to be a need to build this project regardless, because we need the tungsten, we need the tin. We may not be buying it from China. China's talking about shutting down the rare earths at the moment supply. So there's this geopolitical commodity saber rattling happening at the moment. So we all kind of depend on each other, but all of a sudden we're looking at, maybe we want to get our boron from somewhere else, or we want to get our tungsten from somewhere else, or tin, and that's why building Mount Lindsay and I call it a critical minerals project. And I used to say tin and tungsten, but now I can add boron to that now. Is important in a geopolitical sense, and the fact it's using renewable energy, as we've said a number of times before, with hydro and wind power generation, going underground, reducing that footprint, and trying to maximise the opportunity or minerals that come out of Mount Lindsay's. It is a true polymetallic project, and the new FAO project in Vietnam that I spoke about earlier is a perfect example of that. They've just got on and built it. They built it. We're recovering these minerals, and that mine's going very well by all reports. They've become a very significant non-Chinese tungsten producer. That's the important part.
News flow going forward. What are people going to be expecting?
Well, look, news flow has been a little bit on the, as you alluded to early on. We hadn't spoken for a while. It's been a little bit shy. But we've been working on the study. We've been looking at Riley again, because the iron ore price has been popping up, getting close. Would have been nice if the cyclone was a little bit further south and shut Port Hedland down for a week or so. But anyway, so we've got a range of projects, a range of commodities. We've been drilling in the Mount Lindsay area for a while. Some news flow on that. Chalice are active on our ground in the Southwest project. We've got other assets in WA. So as you get this work done, you get the assay results, it'll come out cooler than we did the EM.
Okay.
So that data comes in, you've got to be interpreted, you've got to go and do some field checking, and and come up with something meaningful to put out to the market, material to put out to the market. So it's coming to that point where a lot of things are going to start coming out to the market. So expect much more news flow over the coming weeks/months.
Okay. The moment to sell your soul, mate. Why VMS? Why buy VMS?
Why buy VMS? Well,
apart from the fact it's really cheap today.
it's very cheap. We've been at 16 cents probably 21 months ago, and we've been low as 0.8 of a cent when COVID was at its peak there in March 2020. But that's also the same day that opportunity knocked at the door, better known as Chalice, bizarre as it may sound, and we know what such a great company they are. So when you look at, you compare us against, having a, multi-billion-dollar company like Chalice working with us, having access to a commodity which, companies, like I said before, have got 10 or 15 times our market cap, got another string to our bow. We've got a great number of opportunities. And then, you only need one of those to sort of stick at the end of the day, and all of a sudden we're back to that $200 million market cap quite quickly. So, it can be frustrating at time, and obviously we're at the mercy of the markets, and the markets have been somewhat challenging the last.
Oh, it's getting better. I think it's getting better.
But it's getting better. That's right.
Yeah.
And I think it's starting to turn around, and I think momentum of the, our Mount Lindsay boron announcement and a couple other things, and then we'll start sort of seeing the share price recover and back to where it was at least 12 months ago, and hopefully well beyond that.
Oh, look, I think the boron asset, you pulled another rabbit out the hat. I think it's a really interesting one. It's fairly consistent with how I picture Mount Lindsay in the first place. I think it's a good story. As I was saying to somebody before, our very well balanced mineral resource portfolio is right for averaging down, and I think that's all the reasons for getting into positions with companies like VMS, I guess, in some ways. But look, Andrew, thank you again. We will surely enough, hopefully your news flow, as you said, is news coming up soon. Again, you haven't had coffee for a while. You must be dying for the coffee.
Hankering for a coffee.
So that's your going away gift.
Thank you very much.
And till next time, thank you.
Okay, all the best. Thanks again, Noel.